So we're still here. You know, they say death can come anytime. We're still here. Fortune. Yeah. So we'll continue on. I left off, when was it? Friday? No, Wednesday. Yeah, it's been a few days, huh? Feels like a few weeks. I left off there and just talking about, the Buddha's awakening and then hesitancy to teach, and then how he started to teach. So we'll continue along that line, and as we do that, talk about how the Sangha was formed and how different traditions of practice and different Vinaya traditions came, the different levels of ordination, the different ways of keeping precepts, and we'll get into all of that. Hopefully. Depends how many tangents I go off on. Okay, so we'll start with visualizing the merit field and ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. And the Buddha, with his body of golden light, is looking at us with compassion and acceptance. So let's cultivate our motivation. We we talk a lot about love and compassion, but we have to be very clear about what they mean, because there are many misunderstandings about those two. uh, so love, from a Buddhist viewpoint, is the wish for sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. So that makes us think deeply about what are the causes of happiness, and that in turn pulls us out of our view of the world that is limited to just this life. Because we begin to see that external objects that we have for some period of time, they bring a certain degree of comfort and happiness, but they also disappear. Anything that comes together separates. So we begin to see that the real cause of happiness is not grasping at external things. It comes from transforming our own mind, learning to have a peaceful mind, learning to have a mind that cares about all sentient beings and their environment. So while it's very good to help sentient beings with material needs, and we definitely should do that, the greatest way to help them is by teaching them the Dharma, leading them on the path. And to do that, we have to develop our own good qualities and diminish our hindrances and negativities. And to continue doing that, creating merit, creating wisdom, all the way until we attain full awakening. And then after that, being able to spontaneously, effortlessly, effectively benefit all the sentient beings who are open to be benefited in some way. So let's take that as our long-term goal. Be happy that we have a long-term goal, that we're not floating around in confusion like we used to. And how having love and compassion for sentient beings really enriches our own life and lives for a long time to come. So contemplate that and develop bodhicitta. Okay, so we left off with, after the Buddha's awakening, he taught his 5 friends, yeah, and then he, for 45 years after that, walked all over India and taught whoever requested teachings. Yeah. So he didn't go out and say, I'm here. Do you want to hear what I have to say? You know? So like I said before, no flyers, no advertisements, no charge, you know. And he was able to tune in to where different people were at and teach them accordingly. So many people benefited. And he talked to all different sorts of people. Yeah. Nowadays, everybody's talking about the elites. You know, the elites are the new enemy in America. I'm not quite sure what elites means. It means everybody certain people don't like. That's not a very good definition of elites. And I'm not quite sure what the problem with elites are. But the Buddha taught, you know, he met with everybody. He didn't campaign, and he didn't worry about whether the elites were donating to him or, you know, this kind of stuff. And he wasn't a politician, thank goodness. But people did come to him for problems in their communities and ask him to help, you know, which he did when he was able to do. There was one conflict between 2 clans. I think, if my memory serves me, that the conflict was over water rights. Yeah, and who got the water from a certain river. And they were going to go to war over it. It's kind of like that. It hasn't changed much in 2,500 years, has it? Yeah. So But the Buddha talked to both parties, and they wound up finding a way to share the water, without killing each other. So he was very much involved in people's lives, not just talking about enlightenment, but really how to live a good ethical life. That was really established as the basis of the path. Yeah. And I call my slang term for keeping good ethical conduct is stop being a jerk. Okay? Because when we don't have good ethical conduct, the actions we do are very jerk like, aren't they? We do things that lack wisdom, that harm others, that abuse the environment or abuse different living beings. Yeah. And these kinds of actions are all motivated by our afflictions, yeah, the chief of which is ignorance, and ignorance has a cohort, yeah, a vice president, um, called self-centered mind. And their two foremost disciples are not Mogglayana and Shariputra. Their foremost disciples, the foremost disciples of ignorance, are clinging attachment and anger. Yeah. So that's what we have to work with. Yeah. Sometimes you find in the scriptures language that is like you're fighting. You have to fight against the afflictions. Have you noticed that in some of the scriptures? And people often come to me, especially women, and say, we don't resonate with this language of fighting. Yeah. And yeah, I don't either, particularly. But maybe it's better, instead of seeing it as fighting, as overcoming something that is adverse to human happiness. Yeah. Because if you get in a relationship with your anger where you're fighting your anger, then things are kind of confused, aren't they? Yeah. So you don't want to fight your anger. You want to overcome it as an obstacle. Okay. So as Buddhism spread like this, it was initially the Buddha doing all the teachings. And then as more people became monastics, then he would send the monks out to different areas to teach, because the people there had heard about the teachings and they wanted them. So, the Sangha started spreading to different areas throughout India. And then after some time under King Ashoka, the teachings spread to Sri Lanka, further south, and then centuries later they spread into China, and from China to Korea to Japan. They also spread into Thailand and Southeast Asia, Malaysia, down into Indonesia, and also into Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan. There were incredible Buddhist teachers in those areas. Yeah. You may remember in Afghanistan the big statues. Yeah, huge statues carved into the side of a mountain. And some centuries ago, the Muslims who say that the holy should not be depicted as human beings or in faces. So they had the statues, and they cut off the face of the statue like that. So you just have a blank and then the rest of the statue. I was fortunate to be able to see those when I traveled through Afghanistan in 1973. And but now the Taliban blew the whole thing up. Yeah, you can't see the statues. In the mountain, there were many caves, and so people meditated in all those caves, also carved in the mountain. Quite amazing when you think, how did people build these kinds of things? You know, they didn't have cranes, they didn't have engineers. I don't know if that's good or bad. You know, they didn't have regulations from the government. The king just decided, well, you know, we want these. And then, I don't know, maybe, you know, hired the people, or maybe there were some people who were forced to do it, but created these incredible monuments. Yeah. So as Buddhism spread to different places, it was influenced by the culture and the geography and of those places, and also whatever kind of spiritual traditions existed there when Buddhism entered. Yeah, they were very much influenced by all those things. And I say this, you know, because when I just initially started practicing with Tibetan Buddhism, I didn't know anything about different kinds of Buddhism. I didn't know anything except that what these teachers taught helped me, and it was true. But, you know, as Buddhism spread, then, for example, in Southeast Asia, they were able to continue doing pindapat, the alms round. Yeah. In China, when Buddhism went to China, they couldn't continue that because the Chinese mentality thought they were begging, and they disparaged begging. So they didn't have that tradition of giving food to wandering mendicants like what it was prevalent in India even before the Buddha and his disciples were there. Also, when Buddhism went to Tibet, a quarter of the male population became monks. And if all of those monks went into Lhasa, which was not a terribly big city, if they all went into Lhasa every day to collect alms, the lay people would have been overburdened, you know, with feeding so many people. So there, they started bringing offerings to the temple, and then as the donations were made to the monasteries started buying food. Okay, that happened. A similar thing happened in China, you know. So it happened because of the culture, because of the climate. Also in Tibet, it was so cold. Walking from the major monasteries into town would be daunting. Yeah. Okay. So you have this kind of influence all along. And I like to talk about the culture and really look at Buddhism through those eyes, because when I first encountered Tibetan Buddhism, you know, it was clear to me, you know, that they were teaching what the great masters had said, you know, because what they said made sense. But, and, and they were saying, we're just teaching you, it's a pure lineage being passed down. So I thought every single small thing I learned must have come from the Buddha. Yeah. And that's not exactly how it is, okay? Because what happens is in different cultures, people add their own ceremonies. They put a Buddhist spin on it. Spin isn't the right word, but you know, they develop new liturgy, they develop new practices that are based on the Dharma, but function really well to the people in that culture. Okay, so for example, in China, Buddhism was very, very widespread. Literacy was not. Most of the common people were illiterate, uh, well into the 20th century. So, how are these people going to learn the Dharma if they can't read the scriptures? How are they going to practice? Yeah, there were no, uh, hard disks and iPads and all this tape recorders and things like that to record. So it had to be something that was clear and simple that people who were illiterate, who worked in the fields, could practice and benefit from. Okay, so one of the practices that became popular in China was the practice of Amitabha. Yeah, and there's a lot of literature about the practice of Amitabha. There's sutras about it. There's teachings by some of the masters and so on about it. But to teach just the common people, sitting down and going through one of the sutras and explaining it isn't going to work, okay? And telling people to do a long sadhana of Amitabha practice, they don't have time for that in their life. So what developed was the practice of reciting Amitabha's name, okay? And uh, and the blessings that came from that would then help somebody to accumulate merit, to purify their mind, and then, they could be more open to the teachings and so on. And so people started chanting Namo Amitofo, okay? And sometimes again went Namo Amitofo. Namo means homage, which means you show respect, you bow, and you make offerings, and you take refuge. Okay, that's all in the word Namo Amidofo. Okay, Ami was Amitabha, and Pho means Buddha. So instead of saying Namo Amitabha Buddha, it became Namo Amitofo in Chinese. Okay, um, and this practice really spread. People loved it. Um, to this day, the practice is very widely done. When 5 of our nuns were in Taiwan this spring to receive Bhikshuni ordination, in the middle of one of the teachings, there was an earthquake. And so the Bhikshuni preceptor who was teaching at that time, she just automatically started saying Namo Amitofo, and everybody in the room started saying Namo Amitofo. It was just what you do automatically when there's some kind of danger. Yeah. So it has deep roots in India, but the practice was really diluted, not diluted, diluted when it went to China to make it simple for the people. But it really fit the culture. Yeah. What was unfortunate is that people didn't have access to the teachings about how to do the visualization, how to meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta, and so on. Okay, so yeah, I gave a talk in Singapore a few years ago about the Amitabha practice, and afterwards, so many people came up to me and said, "Wow!" It was just a talk for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they came up, "Wow! I didn't know all that was in the Amitabha practice," and and I just touched on a little bit of it. Okay, so that's just one example, cultural influence. Also, like in Tibet, the whole tradition of debating came from India into Tibet. The Tibetans adopted that. That's very prominent in many of the monasteries, not all of them, but many of them. Yeah. But in China, it was, because of the power of Confucianism and the emphasis um, on respectability. Yeah. In Confucianism, you had to do your duty and be a good citizen and be respectable. So for the Chinese to debate, that was not gentlemanly. Yeah. Because if you've seen the Tibetans debate, they're jumping and screaming and clapping and shouting and pushing each other. Not the nuns. The nuns are much, yeah. But the monks, it's just amazing. Now, for people from China, when they see this, it's like, these are Buddhist practitioners. Look at the way they're acting. Yeah. Okay, so that kind of technique, it didn't work in China. It didn't work in Thailand either, okay, and in Southeast Asia. So things got adapted to fit the culture. And as I mentioned before, also with the climate, whether you went on Pindapat or not, also the relationship with the government in Tibet, um, the powerful noble families and the Buddhist traditions. Well, the noble families supported different Buddhist traditions, and then those traditions, had a lot of input into how the country was run. And then, of course, um, some of the lay people then put the monastics in charge of the government. So, what was it, Kubla Khan? Yeah, who installed, that was, I think, when the Khargyu lamas started running. No, the Sakya lamas, I forget what it is. Do you remember? Hmm? What, Sakya? Yeah, first Sakya, yeah. Then later it was Khargyu. Yeah, but they started being, and then, the fifth Dalai Lama is kind of like the focal figure of not only religion, but of the operation of the government. And for the Tibetans, they say, well, we want somebody who's a holy being in charge of the government because that person can make wise decisions. We don't want Joe Blow who doesn't know what they're talking about, doesn't care about the Dharma. We want somebody who's a spiritual practitioner. Yeah. So that kind of thing worked very well for the Tibetans. And it wasn't until a few years ago with the 14th Dalai Lama that he then exited from that, having that position in the Tibetan government. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's the only culture that I know of where the leader wanted to have less power and the people wanted him to have more power. Yeah, it's interesting. And that was, the way that worked for them and their faith. Okay. But when Buddhism went into China, the Confucian scholars were already had a certain input in the court, and Buddhism was something new. So there was a little bit of, how's this going to work out? And then plus, because the Chinese at that point just thought, these people are beggars. Why are they bothering us? And the monks from their side didn't want to be in the position where they were embroiled in the government and in the whole hierarchy, and that would compromise their ability to practice. So the Sangha moved out into the mountains, and and they started doing farming. According to our precepts, we're not supposed to farm and dig in the earth, but when you look at Chinese history, that was a smart move by the Sangha, because if they stayed in the city, they would either get involved with politics, which would hamper their practice, or and all the shenanigans in the court, and then also being the newcomer in a place where Confucianism was, those people were already kind of had sway over the government. Yeah, so they went out to the mountains, and then you have the whole Zen tradition. What is it? One day without work is one day without food. So the whole idea that you have to do something physical and manual labor is part of your practice. Yeah. In Thailand, no, they keep the precepts quite strictly. They don't farm. They go on pindapat. They don't cut down the trees. They don't cook because one of the precepts is not to cut vegetables, because in ancient times, vegetables often had worms in them, and so you didn't want to inadvertently kill a sentient being. Again, now in America, we cut our vegetables because, unless it's something from, a fruit, for example, from somebody's own garden or a vegetable, then, there aren't going to be bugs on it. So, yeah. So just to give you some idea about how things are different, and that these are ways for Buddhism to feel comfortable in different cultures. Okay. Um, the chanting is very different from one place to the next. On Tuesdays and Saturdays, you'll hear us doing Chinese chanting. Yeah, if you've heard Tibetan chanting, you can see there's a difference. Okay, um, so there's many of these kinds of differences. Also, our robes. I mean, my goodness. So, uh, even among the Theravada practitioners, the robes are very different colors. In Thailand, they're kind of an ochre color. Yeah, you go to Sri Lanka, they are bright, bright, bright orange. Yeah, in Burma, they're more of a muted, almost brown color. Yeah, uh, and they wear the robes as it was dictated in the Vinaya, which was very suitable for hot climates and very suitable for men, male bodies. Okay, so but when Buddhism went into China, well, first of all, in ancient India, kind of saffron color was, or golden color, that was for the royalty. Nobody else but the emperor was allowed to wear that. So the Sangha couldn't go in wearing this color, yeah. Uh, so what they did is they adopted the robes. Well, first of all, they changed the color to gray or black or sometimes brown. And they adopted the style of the robes of the Tang Dynasty court. Yeah? What they kept and what you find in all of the Buddhist traditions, even though the robes may look different, they all have the pattern of stripes on the cloth, okay? And that pattern came from when the Buddha was looking out at all the rice fields in India. If you've been in India, you know that there's like all these rice plots and, that are in a patchwork kind of formation. So the Buddha was looking out on that and he said, oh, this is really beautiful. And then since the Sangha at that time made their robes out of rags, it was convenient to, stitch different pieces of rags together to make a robe. Yeah. And saffron in India was considered like an ugly color. So it was good for renunciants. In China, like I said, it was something the emperor wore. It wasn't suitable for the Sangha to wear that. And then also, in India being hot, okay, as you'll notice, our arms are bared. If you've ever seen the Thai monks, yeah, there's just one thing wrapped around here. They wear a shemdop, but their shemdop goes into kind of like until the mid calf, yeah. Whereas our robes we wear longer, yeah. Mid calf. If your robes are too high, kind of your mid calf or even 2/3 down, that doesn't look so good. Okay, so but the Chinese, they go all the way to the floor. Okay, and you're wearing these huge, humongous sleeves, a la Tang Dynasty court. With some of them, maybe you can do a fashion show, and these big things, and in Thai Buddhism, well, not just Thai, but in Theravada Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, you have, one set of, one style of robes, and you wear your robes no matter what you're doing, okay? Here at the Abbey, then when we go out in the forest where we could be ruining our robes working, or when you're doing manual labor with machines, then we put on pants instead of wearing our robes for safety reasons and to respect the robes, okay? But in Thailand, the Theravada countries, they don't do that because the most manual labor they do basically is sweeping and sometimes, helping with carrying different things and stuff like that. But, in China, to show your flesh is really risque. So the robes, go all the way down. They go past your fingertips, okay? They're really long. The robes go to the floor, and you have different robes for different functions, okay? So you wear these one kind of, we call them pajamas, but the Chinese don't call them pajamas, but they look like what we would wear as pajamas, okay? So you have that. That's your basic robe, okay? Except it's not a robe, that wasn't what the Buddha taught, prescribed in the Vinaya. And then when you do go to the meditation hall or you do chanting, you put on what's called the Hai Ching, which is a big, humongous black robe that, again, the sleeves go out beyond your finger and they go down here and then up here, enormous sleeves, okay, on both sides. And then you have to wrap that around, and they don't put buttons in it, so you either have to tie things or they have little, what do you call those, like knots of some sort, yeah, that you use in place of buttons, but they have pockets. Yeah, Tibetan robes, no pockets. You're supposed to shove it in your donka. Yeah, that works great for men, not so well for women. Okay, but so the whole style of the robes, you wear that when you're doing some chanting or meditation. When you're working, then there's a shorter robe that you wear. When you go out into town, then there's another longer robe that you wear. And then on top of all of that, you have your, instead of wearing what you call your 5-stripe robe, which the Tibetans wear as our lower robe, our shemdop, the Chinese have it up here, and so you have that. And then you have the 7-strip robe, this one, okay? And then you have, the Chinese call it 9-strip, but into the Tibetan it's often like around 19, not the chugu, the namchar, okay? So so you have all these different robes, and you have to know what to put on for what occasion. And when you go to the bathroom, except for your pajamas, you can't go in with any of the other robes. So all day long you are putting on robes and taking them off and putting them on, taking them off. Am I correct? Is that what you did? Oh, yeah. You don't just take, well, the thing is for us, because we were, I was a preceptor, we had hooks in our room. So we could hang, we had hangers and hooks, so we could hang the robes. But normally, you take it off, you fold it up, you go to the bathroom, you come out later, a few minutes later, then you undo the robe, you put it on again. Sometimes you have to put 2 robes on again, and that works until it's lunchtime. Then you have to take off both of those, and then you have to put another one on, and you have to put your 7 strip on again, and yeah. So yeah. So what the point I'm getting at is that everybody does things different. Yeah. And they all have reasons for why they do it the way they do it. Mhm. Um, yeah. So, uh, yeah, for us, when we were there, I think all of us, tell me if I'm wrong, were very happy to come back and put our Tibetan robes on again. Yeah. Some people say yes, some people, okay, we'll give you all the clothes and you can change all day. Yeah. So, um, so just as outer things like the clothes changed, and the altars, how you did your altar changed. Yeah. All the altars have offerings. Okay. But how many offerings and how the altar is designed, it differs from one place to the other. You may have seen Zen altars, very simple. Yeah. And sometimes Theravada altars, equally simple, a statue, a few offerings, that's it. Yeah. Okay. You go to Tibetan altars, Tibetan centers. Yeah. What we do is nothing. This is like a very poor altar. But everything, you have colors everywhere, statues, paintings, not just one statue, the Buddha, so many things, so many offerings, colors. Yeah. Now, if you think about it, yeah, the Japan, what's the climate like in Japan? What's the geography like? You have big mountains, you have the sea, there's many different colors, many things grow in Japan. Yeah. And so what do people there want for their practice is simplicity. Yeah. Instead of, an environment with lots of trees and plants and this and that, just a simple altar. In Tibet, yeah, you go outside the house and you can see miles and miles, and there is nothing except maybe a few bare mountains. Okay, so what do you want in your altar? Color, life, lots of things. Okay, so, again, how things um, got done according to the place. The as I mentioned, the chanting is different. Also, the musical instruments are different. And His Holiness Dalai Lama, when he talked about it, he said, "Well, in the West, if you want to, you can use the guitar or the piano, and you can change the chants." And, we haven't been so inclined here, okay? But, uh, we've tried to develop some melodies that, we like, and we've also adapted some of the Chinese melodies so that we can chant English with a Chinese melody. Okay. And so not only did these outer things change, but different places, the people in different places emphasize different practices. And also, according to when Buddhism went to a particular place and who brought it there, they received different scriptures. So the practices that each place developed and felt really comfortable with depended on which scriptures had arrived there, and then also the teachers involved and and what they thought fit the culture. Okay, so one very stark example of this is that Theravada, or the Pali tradition, is what we usually call it. The Pali tradition spread very publicly, at the time of the Buddha. And then when King Ashoka came to power, a few centuries after the Buddha, then he sent both his son and his daughter to Sri Lanka, and with texts, and the Buddhism started to spread there. But at that time, there wasn't there wasn't much writing. Okay, at least not public writing. There may have been people writing things down and recording things, but in the usual kind of commerce interchange in a society, a rural society, where very few people were literate, um, everything was passed down orally. So from the very beginning began the tradition of memorizing scriptures. And there was a special type of monastic. They were called Banakas, from which the term Bhante, used in Theravada Buddhism, came from. So these were the people who were to memorize the different sutras, and then they would teach them, phrase by phrase to their disciples, and the whole tradition was passed down orally. Nothing was written down until about started to write down in a public way until like the 1st century BC. So that influenced it. The fact that it was an oral tradition, and you see that in the Tibetan tradition right now. There's a great emphasis on memorization. Yeah, isn't there? Yeah, and you're tested on your memorization, and there are little chants. Things are written, verses are written with 7 syllables or 9 syllables, and you memorize them in da 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 da. You can probably do it better than me. Yeah. But you start out, you go in the monastery when you're this big, and you start memorizing things. You don't understand what you're saying, okay? But your teacher teaches you, you repeat it, you learn it, and then as you grow older and you start having classes, then you're introduced to the whole philosophy behind what you've been memorizing. We memorize times tables, right? Maybe, I don't know now if you even memorize times tables. Everything's on the computer, kind of, yeah. So, yeah. But there, they value scriptures, but the memorization is very strong. Yeah. Yeah. So, talking a lot. So again, those sutras that the Buddha taught during his life in a very public way, they became the Pali tradition. Yeah. And the Pali tradition evolved over time. At first they were just passing down these sutras orally, and then people started writing commentaries. And then the commentaries were passed down orally, and the commentaries were used to understand the sutras. And this happened in everywhere Buddhism went, you know. Initially it was orally, then it got written down, and also the people from that country started writing commentaries. Yeah. The Tibetans really rely on the commentaries, more so actually than the sutras in many ways, because the commentaries take what's in the sutra and unpack it so you could really understand what it means. Um, yeah. So different things were emphasized in different places. In the Pali tradition, what was emphasized was renunciation, concentration, wisdom. Yeah, what we call the three higher trainings. So ethical conduct, which leads us to, to either aspire for good rebirth in samsara or acts as the foundation of merit that we need to generate concentration, which supports the development of wisdom, wisdom being what actually gets you out of samsara. Okay, so that's what's emphasized in Theravada Buddhism to this day. Yeah, in China, Buddhism went there later, and around the first century A.D. Around just a century before that, Buddhism started going to China, and it went sometimes the sea route through the Bay of Bengal, through the Straits of Malacca, Malacca, and then up the east coast of Asia. Went into China that way. It also went overland through, people going across the mountains through the Gobi Desert, the Silk Road. Yeah, so two routes to China, and it spread. It spread there, like I said, a few centuries after it had gone to Southeast Asia and to South Asia. Uh, and so by that time, the sutras that were really popular in India were the Mahayana sutras. The Pali tradition still existed then, but the Mahayana sutras really came to the fore, and they were practiced and spread. And so actually in China, they got a lot of the Pali sutras from that tradition, plus the Mahayana sutras. Yeah. So they have really a lot in the Chinese canon. At that time, Buddhism wasn't into Tibet. Tibet didn't get the teaching until like the 6th, 7th century. Yeah. By that time, Tantra was very popular. Yeah. So the sutras from the Pali vehicle, many of them went into Tibet, but sometimes the sutras didn't go in, but the different passages of them were excerpted into Indian commentaries and Indian treatises so that those same teachings did go into Tibet. Yeah. And then on top of that, you had the Mahayana teachings, which presented the whole idea of bodhicitta, one final vehicle where everybody would eventually enter the bodhisattva vehicle and become a Buddha. It presented a slightly different way of seeing emptiness or selflessness. Yeah. So those sutras impacted. So in the Theravada countries also, the Mahayana did go there, and some of the Tantra went there. But what happened is that one of the Sri Lankan kings decided that, no, we're getting rid of those teachers and just sticking with the Pali teachings. So here you have the secular government telling the Buddhists what to do. Yeah. So this is one reason you can see why in China they left the city. They didn't want the government controlling them like that. So, yeah, so any mention of the Mahayana, Vajrayana, and so on got banished from Sri Lanka. There's still little bits that remain where you can go there and see statues. When I was in Thailand, when I was working on the series, The Library of Wisdom and Compassion for His Holiness, he wanted me to go to Thailand and study there. So it was very interesting. The monastery where I stayed, very strict, traditional forest Theravada monastery. And the abbot was building a small temple for Kuan Yin. And the abbot had gone to Putoshan, the island of Kuan Yin in China, yeah, and they had a picture of him, praying there, and from one of the statues there was rainbow light coming into him. Yeah, so he had, usually strict Theravada, yeah, but in that area of Thailand, apparently, there were, there was a great Mahayana influence, at least in terms of, respecting Kuan Yin. Yeah. So, yeah. And then, of course, you have Kuan Yin in China, which became Chenrezig in Tibet. And in China, Kuan Yin sometimes was male, sometimes was female. In Tibet, male. Yeah. So these kinds of things happen partly, because things change as they go from one person to the next, but also according to what worked for the people. Yeah. And so the Mahayana tradition, by and large, became very popular in China. There's still some Theravada being taught and practiced there. Yeah. In Tibet, the Mahayana just really swept through, as did the Vajrayana. Okay. You have some Vajrayana went to China. Yeah. It wasn't real popular. It didn't become popular in China. Yeah. But from China, it went to Japan, and so you have the Shingon tradition, Buddhist tradition in Japan, which is a Vajrayana tradition. Okay, so as things went different places, people were attracted to this tradition, this practice, this tradition, that, and so things developed differently in different places. And of course, for centuries and centuries, there was very little contact between them. Yeah, because you had to walk. Yeah, and when Buddhism came to Tibet, you had to go over the Himalaya mountains. It wasn't easy, yeah, to get there. So, Buddhism came there later. It was more isolated. So Tibetan Buddhism evolved in its own way there. But also in China, you have the arising of different traditions, mostly Mahayana. Some are Pali traditions. Yeah. And then you have everywhere, uh, the because in India, you didn't have names for all these different traditions because there wasn't the plurality, because at the beginning everything was centralized, in India. But after things began going out like that, and Buddhism has never had a pope, and I hope never will have a pope, and the Dalai Lama is not a pope, then, there wasn't one central authority. So it developed differently in different countries. Yeah. Like I said, in Sri Lanka, the government, could interfere. In Thailand, the government has control over the Sangha too. Also in Burma, in Tibet, it was the monastics were in the government as well as the noble families were in the government. In China, I don't think they were so much in the government, the Sangha, they had to have some connections, but not a lot. Yeah. So I'm telling you all of this so that you don't have the idea that Buddhism is one thing that you can put in one nice box and say, this is it, and everything that my teacher didn't teach is not the Dharma. That really devolves into sectarianism, which is not at all helpful for the existence of the Buddhist teachings. Yeah. So we want to be open and welcoming to all the different forms of Buddhism, although we may have our own way of practicing. And as Buddhism comes to the West, certain things will change. Yeah. Starting with the external things. What everybody wants to make sure happens as Buddhism goes to different places is that you do not change the Dharma itself. Okay, the robes may change, how you keep the precepts may change, the way the altar looks changes, the language the Dharma is taught in changes, all these kinds of things change, but everybody wants to keep the core teachings, especially of whatever lineage is emphasized in their particular monastery or their locale. Yeah, and that's something really important to keep in mind with Buddhism coming to the West. There's sometimes talk in Buddhist magazines about American Buddhism. Yeah. What's American Buddhism? McBuddhism? Yeah. Yeah. McBuddhism, and everybody goes out to the bar after teachings, and you go skiing. You have your retreats in ski areas or in beach areas. In Singapore, they don't do the skiing, but the beach. Yeah, and in nice, expensive hotels in Thailand. They go and they have a retreat, so you can go to the beach, you can go to the swimming pool, you can eat a whole lot of your favorite food and spend a lot of money, and have some teachings and meditation session at the same time. Yeah, so that's the newest wave of modern Buddhism for some people. Yeah. Those are mostly, well, no, I was going to say they were lay things, but there were some monastics who were leading those kind of retreats, but they were organized by the lay people. But one of our challenges is, as different Buddhist traditions come to America, is really learning well what the teachings are, bringing the full meaning of the teachings, to this country without adding things that aren't there and distorting things, but and then expressing them in ways that fits the culture here. Okay, so it's a huge responsibility. It's not some light thing of, oh, well, we're bringing over this teacher and that teacher and da 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 da. And, we like this, we like that, but we don't like this and we don't like that. No, but, really learning the teachings well and teaching the teachings well. Okay. So now, okay, so that's very important, and especially for us as living in Western countries, what it means for us. So, okay, maybe changing some external things. There's something, as you notice, I cannot keep my chugu on my shoulder. I would love having chugus with the buttons or some kind of ties. It would be nice. We redesigned our donkas. We stitched them down the front. They're not open, for the, yeah. So there's things. We stitched in our pleats on our shemdap. Have you seen our robes? Yeah. Oh, you have to show her. Yeah. Um, yeah. So we made slight revisions to them uh, because it just feels more comfortable to wear them that way. And nowadays, we have sewing machines and snaps and Velcro and all sorts of things. We don't have to hold up. The usual robe is this humongous circular thing that you fold in different ways, and then you have to get a belt and tie the belt tight before the whole thing falls down, because it's only your belt that holds it up, And during my whole ordination, I'm trying to say all these things in Tibetan, which I don't know what it means. And, I was so afraid that my robe was just going to fall off. Yeah, this is a common thing. And then, keeping your Zen on. The Zen is the maroon one that we have, the upper robe, So, I can see us changing some things, yeah, but we will keep the stripes that you find in all the Buddhist traditions. Yeah, so different changes like that. Maybe we'll have a summer robes and winter robes. I don't know. The Chinese have so many robes. Oh my goodness, Tibetans, you just change one, back one change of clothes, you can go. Chinese, this and this and this and that and the other thing. And yeah. Theravada robes, also very simple, except the namjar, the long one, the upper robe, which is even bigger than this one, then the Theravada monks you have to put over here, and you have to wrap it roll it in a circle, and then you do some kind of, I don't know how they do it to get it over their shoulder. Yeah. um, so, yeah. So, I can see some of those things getting modified, but we need to learn the teachings and teach them accordingly, without changing stuff. This is one of the great fears I have about Buddhism coming to America, is that, it's like, mindfulness. Everything is mindfulness. Yeah, all you have to do is be mindful. Yeah, so you're mindful, your breath is going in and out, and you're visualizing being at the beach with Buddha Boy, and you fantasize with a background of relaxing music, and that's your meditation practice. I don't remember the Buddha ever teaching that. Okay. So we have to, the secular mindfulness is very helpful for people, but that is secular mindfulness. That is not the mindfulness that the Buddha taught. Okay. And then you have, because it's so many lay teachers here, most of the teachers are lay teachers in this country and in the West. And lay teachers have families, yeah. So what do they think about the monastics who are celibate, who wear the same clothes every day, who don't have a social life like them? Well, these monastics, they're in a patriarchal tradition, a hierarchical patriarchal tradition that is opposite to democracy. And we are democratic. So we don't want hierarchical things. Yeah. So who's ever in charge of the monastery, who's ever kind of the high lamas in the tradition, they said, listen to us. We don't know anything, but we care. Okay, I don't think that's going to work. And so what you find with the lay movement, how they look at, well, I just said how they look at monastics. We're hierarchical. We're patriarchal. That's a wonderful thing that you hear as a nun, that you're in a patriarchal system. Yeah. But American Buddhism, everything's equal. Except if you look closely, the men still run the thing. You have a few more women involved in the West, yeah, and some prominent women teachers. But looking at the Sangha as these people are repressing their sexuality. That's the big thing in the West, isn't it? I mean, the newspaper, what do you sell? I mean, every newspaper has something about sex in it. Your toothpaste has something to do with sex. So does your laundry detergent and your toilet cleanser. Everything is sold on the basis of something having to do with sex, So they look at monastics and you guys are repressing your sexuality, And we try and explain, well, actually, keeping celibate, it gives you a lot more freedom, a lot more time. You don't have families to take care of. You don't have all of that stuff, and so you can go deeper in your practice. You have time to meditate and study and so on. And then some of the lay people say, but you get the same thing in a marriage. You have to develop compassion for the person, same way you do in a monastery. Well, what do you think? Same way? No. Yeah. In lay life, it's you develop compassion, and people who challenge you are limited to a few people in your family. And you also get extra added perks with lay life that you don't get as a monastic, okay? In lay life, you have sex, you have a partner well, they're supposed to always support you, tell you how wonderful you are, do things for you. You always have somebody by your side. Monastic life, you have to grow up and learn to take care of yourself emotionally. You can't, just keep running to people crying like, you would run to your spouse. So it's quite different. Yeah. But so one thing I feel very strongly about here at the Abbey is what we're trying to do is preserve the monastic tradition in the West because it's crucial. I think it's really crucial for the existence of the Dharma in this country. Yeah, because historically it's been the Sangha that has the responsibility of learning, practicing, preserving, teaching the teachings. Yeah. And that's hard to do if you're a layperson. I really respect many of the lay teachers, but I also know, having been a layperson once myself, that it's hard to focus when you have a family and when you have a job and when you have social obligations and things like that. Your time just gets eaten up. So it's different. Also, for the broader Buddhist community, the value of monasteries is really important. The monasteries aren't just for monastics. I mean, many of you here are not monastics, but it serves a function in society in terms of when somebody wants to learn the Dharma, they know where they can go. When somebody needs meditation instruction, they know where they can go. When they need spiritual counseling, yeah, they know where they can go. Yeah, and they can come to the monastery anytime they want. Okay, 2 o'clock in the morning, and just wait a few hours, we'll be up. We'll take care of you. But, aside from that, is, everybody can come and make requests for, somebody dies, they ask for prayers, or somebody's sick, they ask for prayers and pujas and so on. And if Buddhism is just with lay people, yeah, when you have a need like that, what are you going to do? Go ring the doorbell of a suburban house, and your Dharma teacher comes to the front door holding one baby here and another child following them? And you say, I need help. Somebody in my family is dying. And they say, excuse me, come back tomorrow. Can't you see that I'm busy with my kids? Okay, so having monastics who are available for the public is important, and having monasteries where you structure your life so that you do have time for practice and for study. Those are important to preserve the Dharma from one generation to the next. Yeah. And I could go off on that for a long time, but we have 5 minutes left, so questions, comments. Yeah.
You're Venerable. I feel like we're in a unique situation here in the West, just due to the number of Buddhist traditions that we have access to at any given time. Someone in ancient Tibet couldn't say, oh, do I attend the Japanese Zen temple, or do I attend the Theravadan temple, or do I attend the Gelug temple? No, you attend the temple that was in your village. And especially now in the internet age, you could literally engage with any tradition in the world at your fingertips. And I notice a lot of people tend to, engage in tradition hopping because of this, because, it's all Dharma, so you do see the truth in all these different traditions, and people have trouble deciding, well, which one do I follow? What advice do you have for that?
I think that on an individual level, I think that depends on the individual. Yeah. Some people are very fortunate, and at the very beginning, here we're talking about those of us who are converts to Buddhism, not people who are raised Buddhist. But it depends on, because there's so many things. Some people want to try all 31 flavors before they get the ice cream cone. Yeah, so they tradition hop. Some of them just because, well, I want to see what it's all about, and I'll taste all of them, and then I'll choose which one I like better. Okay, so that kind of mind I don't think is very helpful. Yeah, because you're just looking for the next big hit, hoping the next temple you go to will be the one where you are electrified and you feel shivers up and down when the teacher comes in the room. Westerners like this kind of stuff. I wouldn't choose my teacher that way, according to who gives me the shivers when they walk in the room. It's the cold room that gives me the shivers, In my own particular case, I had gone to 2 talks of different traditions, and the talk was interesting, but I never went back. But when I saw a flyer about Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa were giving some talks in Los Angeles, I had already been to India, I'd been to Nepal. When I saw those flyers, I said, let's go. and went, and then they had a retreat following that for 3 weeks. I went, and after that, I went, I was going to go back to Asia and study with them in Asia. And like I said before, what they taught, when I checked it out logically, it worked. When I practiced it, it helped me. I was totally satisfied with that. I didn't even know that there were different traditions. I mean, I was totally naive. There were no Buddhist magazines at that time in English. Yeah. There's hardly any books to read. So, uh, I went, what they said made sense, it helped me. I kept going back. Yeah. And then my teachers, also sent me to study with their teachers. I don't think it was just because they wanted to get rid of me, but I wound up meeting, many great teachers that way who were also the teachers of my teachers. So, and I just stuck with that tradition. But then you have other people. Venerable Samkhya tells the story of Charlatananda. She was with a Charlatananda for a while. Yeah, you know Charlatananda, what we mean. Yeah, okay. So, so different people have different experiences. Yeah. I would say that what to look for is, first of all, in terms of teachers, somebody who keeps good ethical conduct, somebody who has studied, who has some meditation experience. They have a whole list in the Mahayana Sutras of 10 qualities of a Mahayana teacher. And look at the reason the person's teaching. Is it out of kindness or out of compassion? Or your donations can go here. Or actually, forget the donations, we're charging. And we have membership fees, which will give you a discount. Yeah. And if you give really a lot of money, then you get to have lunch with the teacher, and we will give you a Buddha statue that's this big. But if you give more money, we will give you a Buddha statue that's this big. Scratch this, you know. And so, I am not at all in favor of that. Yeah, but that's very often how things are done at Dharma centers, because that's how they're done at churches and temples in America. It's the Protestant culture, isn't it? Maybe in Catholicism, they pass the plate and you have to, you tithe, in Catholicism. You have to give, I think it's 10%, yeah, of your income to the church. It's not required, but if you want to get out of hell. Or if you don't want to go to hell to start with, um, that is advised. So, I know I'm being a little crass, but yeah. Okay. Thus spake a Catholic. Yeah. Um, so, there's a tendency to uh, I'm still trying to come back to your question, but Americans, we like to try everything, explore, go and do this, do that, different traditions, different meditation, different teachers. We want the highest teachings. We want to go to Tantra. We don't understand anything, but it's the highest teaching. And I am especially intelligent, so I deserve the highest teaching. Right? Yeah? I mean, you're educated, you got a high school diploma. maybe a college diploma, maybe a master's degree, maybe a PhD, maybe a postgrad position. Yeah, but we're educated, we deserve and want the highest, okay, even if we don't understand it. Yeah. So, I think there's two things. One is to look at our own mind and what are we really looking for? And to be very honest, are we looking for glamour? Are we looking for magic and mystery? Yeah, there's a book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet. And, the early Westerners who went to Tibet, they came back and they wrote books about magic and mystery in Tibet. Because if you only look superficially, with the masks and the dances and the pujas and the blessed water and the blessed pill and the brocade and the height of the thrones and the different kinds of hats and different colors of the hats and all this stuff, it's, So, some people are attracted to that, and then maybe they don't like the teachings that talk about renunciation of samsara, and living a simple lifestyle. They want glamour and exoticism. Yeah. So, what I'm saying is that different people are going to be attracted to different things. Yeah. But I think it's very important that we look at our own mind and say, what am I really looking for? Yeah. And then if you find a teacher who teaches the teachings in a way that really hits your heart and brings them home, that's a very good sign. If that teacher teaches a practice that, as you practice it and get used to it, you really like, that's a good sign. Yeah. And if the teacher has good ethical conduct, that's good. If you can see that they have a good motivation for teaching, they're not just trying to collect offerings and honor and, be respected, that's a good sign. So you check the qualities of the teacher. You check the teachings themselves and see if they make sense and if they help. And then you go from there. And like I said, for some people, maybe the first place you go doesn't really fit you, so you have to try one or two other places. I was fortunate the first teachers I went to, that was it. Okay.
Venerable, what is your advice for monastic to live as, especially when come to survival? My thought is about like in Asia, there's a lot of the monastics that struggling in living or supporting themselves, and a lot of times they only appear in ceremonial presence, which is like maybe somebody dying, praying for 7 months, and I thought that that is not really that what the Buddha's teaching. So I felt a little bit disappointed when I see this, but yet this is a crucial survival for them.
Okay, this starts out with people not living in monasteries. Yeah. If you ordain and you live in your own flat, then, you go to the temple when you want to, you make your own daily schedule, you can be lax in how you keep the precepts and nobody else is around who's going to call you out on it. Yeah. And so those people have difficulty supporting themselves because they're not living in a temple. Yeah. And they may say, oh, the lay people don't support me. But that's because they're choosing to live like lay people. Because you have your own flat, maybe you have a car, you buy your own groceries, you have a TV. Yeah. If you live like that, why should the lay people support you? They're not seeing a difference in your lifestyle. Okay. Whereas if you live in a monastery, it's a different lifestyle. And all of you are getting a taste of that during these days. You know, there's a schedule and you do things with a group, and you don't just, go in the kitchen and take what you want when you want it, and you don't go out to the store and buy what you want when you want something. So it's quite a different lifestyle living in a monastery, and it makes you, it's easier to keep your precepts. It helps your practice. So it's, when I see those situations, uh, you know, what I know when I was ordained, and still now, I think when you people were ordained this last spring, the masters, at least in the Chinese tradition, they are they very much condemn the people who just want to live on their own and then go chanting at funerals. Because you go chanting for funerals, the people give you a lot of offerings, you take that home, you just have your own lifestyle like a layperson. Yeah. So the monastics in China say, do not become like that. In the Tibetan community, also there's an emphasis on living in monasteries for a reason. Yeah, there are certain monastics who live alone. Yeah, it depends where they are from. Yeah, some of the very remote areas, it's difficult to have monastics, to have monasteries. Yeah, and in fact, in some of the remote Himalaya areas, um, some of the women who ordain, yeah, they stay at their own home and they basically are a servant to their family. They keep celibacy, but that's how they live because there aren't any monasteries. It's a poor area. It's remote. Yeah, but I think in our situation where we have access to good teachers and to monasteries, it's really important to stay in a community. Yeah.
I have this question sometimes that comes up. I also noticed that the Dharma in the West, a lot of the teachers, they're therapists or psychologists or psychotherapists. And I'm interested in your take on it, whether sometimes I also ask myself, do I need Dharma, do I need therapy, or do I need both? I wonder what's your take,
Yeah, yeah. I think, very much since the early days of Buddhism in the West, that the therapy community has been interested in it because of the mind training teachings and because of meditation. It can really help with psychological things. But Buddhism and therapy are very different. Okay. Buddhism is for liberation. It's you practice it with the viewpoint of developing your qualities, abandoning all your afflictions, and attaining liberation or awakening. Therapy is done within the context of just this life. You aren't thinking about liberation. You may think about ethics, but not in the perspective of karma, where in a Buddhist thing you think of ethics from karma. What you're doing now is going to influence what you become in your future life and what happens to you. So they're quite different because therapy was has been very popular in the West for a while now. Um, you know, uh, People who come to Dharma are often looking for things that help them with the problems of this life. They aren't looking for liberation or awakening. They want to get along better with their family. Yeah, they want to deal with their anger or get their spouse there, and so the spouse can learn to deal with their anger. Um, you know, so often people are coming for different reasons. like that. There is some crossover, and I think some people who come to Buddhism would be really, they need a therapist. Well, I can't say need, who am I to diagnose? But, it seems like to me that some of the difficulties they're having, therapy would be really helpful for them. Yeah. Other people, I think I know for myself, I work through a lot of my psychological stuff through meditation, through the Lamrim teachings. So it depends on the individual. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some people, yeah, they need Buddhism and therapy. Yeah, no problem.